Welcome to the Pixel Paper Podcast, a series where we get to know the creative processes behind up-and-coming digital artists. My name is Noor, graphic designer and work-in-progress artist, and I'll be your host for this series. Today's episode is an email interview, read and commentated on by yours truly. Hello everyone! Today's episode, it's just gonna be me, and I hope you don't mind too much. I mean, it's been a while since we've done one of these email interview episodes, but I think this will be a good one because we have a Polish illustrator today. We have Kamila Stankiewicz, who works worldwide as an illustrator. She says that she loves drawing for her clients and herself and learning new stuff. Now, I really wanted to interview Kamila because she has a really magical look to her illustrations, and that's kind of the impression that you get when you first see her Instagram, and that's exactly why I wanted to interview her. So I asked her to talk us through her art journey and how she got started. So she says that she started drawing like most people who love drawing in her early years of her life, and she always knew she wanted to draw. She preferred drawing to painting actually back then, and she actually failed the exam at the Warsaw Academy of Art. She said that she was quite good technically, but she now knows that she didn't practice as much as she should have, so practice makes perfect, everyone. She actually instead did landscape architecture. Hello, we have another architect in the house. But after a few months of work as a landscape architect, she was certain that it wasn't exactly right for her, although she does love gardens and plants. And then she wanted to try working as an illustrator as she had always intended, and this time the shoe fit and she had luck. She does a lot of children's book illustrations, and she thinks it's probably because they are one of the most popular themes in illustration, which makes sense. Obviously, children's book illustration is a very big industry, and she also feels like a natural in this field because it allows the full use of your imagination. But she does say that sometimes she would like to paint for adults, because she does like the comic style and also horror, which actually, if you go on her website, you'll see that she kind of has a bunch of different styles, which was actually quite interesting for me because on Instagram she keeps a very similar aesthetic. Well, she keeps an aesthetic basically, which is this kind of very green, pretty, let's say, children's illustrations. And I actually kind of see the landscape architecture tying in, like, because her illustrations are so green, so I can see that being reflected. Having just talked about her website, if you go on there, you can see that she also does animations. So I was really interested to learn more about her animation process. And she explains that she really loves the 2D look, though she has recently gotten into Blender, which is a open source 3D software. She's created a few animations for clients, and even though it's fascinating, it's also very time consuming, especially when it's a one-person job. And anyone who has tried animation, even animating for like 3 seconds, yeah, you will know how much of a job it is. So initially she'll start with the brief or the scenario. She'll get that from the client, and then she'll create a storyboard which she'll then send for feedback, and then she'll create illustrations that she'll be animating. She does say that she uses motion graphic style because it's a lot easier than frame by frame, so that is what she uses. And then after all of that comes the ridiculously long process of animation, corrections, and polishing. Yeah, that's it's a long process, obviously. But I think the result is definitely worth it when it comes to animation, just because even just a tiny bit of animation, like the hair flowing a bit, or like some leaves, or even if, for example, what I like to do a lot is just take a still illustration. I'll kind of do a slow zoom in, and then if the illustration kind of permits, or maybe I'll add this in, I'll either add snow or falling leaves or cherry blossoms falling, something falling and animated, and you can find tutorials online on how to do that. It's actually quite easy, if you have the video editing software, that is. I asked her if her process differs when doing client work, because I know that obviously a lot of people listening to this may may be starting out in illustration, or they may be kind of making that switch into doing more professional work. So I wanted to know what her process is like. And she says that when I get a commission offer, I have to know if it fits my style or styles, since she has quite a wide range, and also if it's something exciting for her, me. I realized I was talking in first person, and now I've switched. I'm just going to talk in third person for this entire interview. She says that the more she loves the story or the theme, the better she'll do her job. And of course, the budget also has a lot of impact, and she searches for opportunities that kind of, have a good balance between those two. And luckily she can find a lot of them now, but it wasn't always easy, especially when she was first starting out. And I guess this is kind of the case with everyone in every kind of career. It's really hard when you're starting out, but once you get that one job, then you can it's kind of like a snowball effect, and you can just keep building on that momentum. I was really curious about her mediums because it seems like she really enjoys simulating traditional media into her digital art. She even has made an extensive watercolor brush pack, which I had a look through. It looks amazing. And she also is the one that introduced me to the Realistic Painting Studio app, which I made a YouTube video on recently. I say recently, I'm filming this or recording this in August, and this is going to come out in late September or October, so yeah. But anyways, I was curious to know, if she thinks she can get the same results digitally as she can traditionally, and when is it best to use traditional versus digital? Her answer is she knows that you can never fully simulate traditional media with digital mediums, but you can get a very close result, and you can even sometimes have a similar painting process. For example, she says that the watercolor spreading simulation in Rebel is magical. So I think Rebel is a painting software. But of course they are very different still. Digital art lets you be more precise and improvise, should I say, and you can repeat every step, obviously Control Z. I'm pretty sure every artist that I've interviewed has mentioned Control Z. You know what? I should have called this podcast Control Z. That would have been a lot better. Anyways. But of course, the happy accidents and unpredictable splashes are kind of what makes traditional media exciting and fun. It's also easier to kind of get tired with working on a real oil or watercolor painting, and you can kind of stop painting and call it done. Whereas with digital, there's literally no end to the tweaking, since it's so easy to do. She actually doesn't know which technique is better for her because she loves them both. She loves painting traditionally, but only when she has the time. And you can also have a physical piece which, you can hang on your wall. But in her work, she uses digital media more often since it's quicker to work in and it's a lot easier to make corrections. Obviously, I found her work through social media, so I was wondering how she uses it to enhance her practice. This is actually a question I've been asking a lot of digital artists lately, just because I'm really curious to know their take on it. As for a lot of artists, she says that social media is a love-hate relationship. All the likes and the followers may suggest that your art is worth only as much as the amount of likes it gets, but that's not necessarily true. And I 100% attest to that because, a lot of the people I interview on the podcast, they may not be super social media savvy, or they may just be starting out, but they may have been an illustrator for a while, or they're probably quite experienced, but they don't have the following which reflects that, which is kind of the reason I wanted to start this podcast, really, because I wanted to give kind of a platform for lesser known artists who, have still really amazing skills. Social media also forces you to do regular posting, and she actually questions this, and she says, is producing a fully finished good piece of art every day still art, or is it more like a production? And that's actually a very interesting question. We not only create, but sometimes we spend more on social media consuming art, and this can actually lead to tears of envy, and social media can just be frustrating at so many levels. But having said that, she says that there are obviously also good sides, like it has forced her to make more practices and studies, and regular posting has also become her routine. So obviously there are good and bad sides to regular posting. It also satisfies her need for creating personal pieces. As a lot of people have said, it's the contact with the followers and the conversations that you have that really kind of makes things meaningful. As humans, obviously, we're always trying to find those meaningful connections, even if it's through an anonymous platform like social media. So she says that she's very inspired by the brilliant works that she finds on social media. And envy can actually be a really good thing when you use it to motivate yourself instead of bringing yourself down. And I think that's a really nice quote, actually. It also gives a lot of great job opportunities and contacts. And in summary, she thinks that she can still see more pros for artists when it comes to using social media. It's just that you have to use it wisely, as with anything in life. I really love her color choices, so I wanted to know, how does she choose her colors and what inspires these colors? And she says that she recently actually made an online course where she went back to basics like compositions, color palettes and everything, and it made her realize that she has a really spontaneous approach to colors. And she doesn't actually think about, like complementary, triadic, analogous, whatever. She kind of just adjusts and corrects, trial and error, basically. She says nature inspires her the most. She loves bright and vivid colors with lots of contrast because it's clearly visible when they are right next to each other. I think when people kind of do things instinctually, like when I've asked people how do they choose colors and they say it comes naturally to them, they probably have had a lot of exposure to it beforehand, or they're either just very good at studying colors. Okay, apparently the second half of this podcast didn't record, so I'm having to re-record this, so I apologize if there's any differences in the sound. But after that question, I asked Kamila what inspires her characters and how does she come up with them and the stories behind them, because she has really kind of magical characters, mostly women or females, mostly kind of like fairy-like or very mystical, like something you'd see in a fairy tale. So she says that a lot of her characters that she draws are from folktales, fairy tales, or just put into a fantasy world, which is literally what I just explained. And they are in major part girls, daydreamers, fantasy creatures, or children on the mysterious paths of childhood. And she generally likes to create new characters each time, but sometimes the characters and their stories stick for longer, like in the case of a comic that she's never actually drawn because of lack of time, or a character called Blue Rose Girl, who she tried modelling for the first time in Blunder as a 3D character, which is pretty cool. Obviously, she creates children's book illustrations, so the work she creates should be telling a story, and so I asked her what kind of stories she wishes to tell through her work and what messages she wants to leave with the viewer. So she says that she's trying to avoid very straightforward and clear messages. She actually prefers to give a viewer some clues and open endings, and she thinks her illustrations are more like an invitation into the story rather than the story itself, which is a really nice way of saying things, because I suppose as a children's book illustrator, you're kind of just giving, or you're kind of just supporting the writing itself. So they, rather than competing with each other, they should be complementing each other. So I quite like that, the way she said that. She likes reading things and stories, and the stories that other people see in her illustrations, and often they are more interesting than the idea itself. If she has to give kind of like a name or a general thought behind the art that she makes, it's basically trying to say that the world is a magical place if you only look carefully enough. So that's kind of the intent behind her work, and I feel like she does convey that quite well. I asked her who her inspirations were, and she said that she really likes 19th century art in general, especially like the decorative and comic-like art of Art Nouveau style. And as for artists in today's 21st century, she really likes Loish and Natalia Pierandrai. Gosh, I completely butchered that. I apologize. Since she has a really soft spot for colours, she also admires artists who knows how to use them really well, like Nathan Fox, and she's also a fan of works by Kim Minnie and Ji Hyuk Kim. as well as Louboutin, but there are obviously a lot more. These are just some. I was really curious because she seems to post a lot on Instagram, so I wondered if she ever had creative slumps and how did she pull herself out of that. But her answer was quite interesting because she said that she doesn't actually get creative slumps because she feels like making art is kind of like a need for her. Like, you need to eat, sleep, and drink. She must also draw and paint, and even though that's the case, her illustration work or her, I guess, client work is not something which satisfies this need. So she has to draw for herself to feel fully happy. Therefore, she says that she is productive all the time, but it's not because she's focused or disciplined. It's more like a default setting. So she can't really take credit for that, which I think is quite interesting. But I mean, surely there must be like some kind of habit that she's done which has kind of created that default setting. I don't know. However, she does really like learning new things, switching styles, media, apps, and brushes, and that keeps her kind of on her toes. And there's always a lot of fascinating things to try and to learn. And that is really true because, especially since I started this podcast, I have actually gone off digital art, I suppose you can say. Like, I've been trying a lot more soft pastel art, and I've been getting back into urban sketching, both in pen and in pencil. So that's been really interesting and it's been really fun, and it's kind of given me a break from the screen, which has been really nice. Other things which allow her to forget about her passion for art is journeys and books, which are also journeys in a sense. I asked her what advice she would give to herself when she was starting out, and she gave 2 pieces of advice. The first of which is she would actually make less polished works and more sketches and exercises and do online courses, which is a really valuable advice, I think, because I feel like we, in such a fast-paced world, we feel the need to create an immaculate portfolio, and we kind of just skip the learning stage. I mean, I know I've done that, or I am doing that a lot, especially when it comes to like trying to get a job. You feel the need to just do and like just make the best work ever and, you know, polish it. But it's also equally important to make sure that you're learning and kind of making the room to make errors, I suppose. The second piece of advice she suggests is don't take commissions you would not want to show in your portfolio. It's better to wait for the better opportunities or create your own project, because true passion and excitement are visible through art. She thinks that those are the 2 most important pieces of advice that she would suggest. And my final question to Kamila was, where does she wish to see herself in the future? And even though it's a difficult, question, she wishes that she could have more freedom, and nothing can give it on the scale as starting your own projects. But of course, that also brings a lot of new duties like, marketing and promotion and strategy and taxes and all that stuff. So she would love to create comics based on Polish folktales or illustrate her own book. Or her final dream is to have enough money to live in a quiet countryside and paint all day long with watercolors in an orchard. And she's still trying to figure that one out. But I do hope that she can do that, because that sounds really lovely. And that's all the questions I had for Kamila. It was quite an interesting interview. I kind of learned quite a bit in terms of just letting go. I feel like I learned that a lot from the artist I interview, is just to kind of let go and just let the creative process do as it should do and don't force it and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I have learned a lot from Kamila, even just looking at her work. I mean, I learned about the new app called Realistic Paint Studio, which I've even made a couple of YouTube videos about. So that's been really fun. And I hope you enjoyed this episode, and, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. You can also subscribe via email, and you can also check out the article on Medium. All the links should be in the description wherever you are listening to this. And with that, I will end this episode here. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week for another episode of the Pixel Paper Podcast. Bye.